In this video, I have got a guest. And in this video, we are talking about a Panasonic HC-1500 and HC-X2000 and setting it up for
live streaming.
If you are here for the first time, my name is Pav, and on this channel I talk about all things photography and video. So if this is your thing, if you're interested in photography and video gear, reviews, lenses, cameras, tutorials, then please consider subscribing. I am here with a guest, with Aaron, so please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Aaron Calvert. I'm a production specialist, and for years now, but since March, obviously more specializing in live streaming for obvious reasons with the pandemic and everything shutting down. So from that side, my production moved completely virtual, and I overnight pretty much became a streaming expert.
In this video, we're going to show you how to set up this camcorder for live streaming. Before we go into it, I need to ask you, why would you use this camcorder for streaming? In what kind of situations? Before you go into setting it up, why would you use it? For what purpose?
So I'm going to be honest, Pav. When I first saw this come out, I went, oh my God, a camera that has live streaming built in? Amazing. And then I suddenly went, when would I use it? Who would use this? Because most of the time, if I'm doing a live stream event or I'm running something for a company or I'm doing it for myself, I'm going to run it through something that I'm going to put graphics over the top and have a bit more control over. And then it sort of dawned on me, this camera, personally for me, comes into its own when you are a streamer of, say, maybe a podcast, or you're sort of a one-man show who goes around and does interviews, and you can take this, connect it to a Wi-Fi network, connect it to your phone network if you want, and sit there, you can set up, plug in your microphones, and stream that out live from anywhere in the world.
Because this is one of the biggest selling points of this camera, was the live streaming. So you obviously don't have to buy any extra hardware. You can just connect it to internet and go with it.
I mean, one of the first things I'll say is I feel like in the menu system, and I mean every camera, including, the Sony A7 IIIs that we're filming on, the menus can be a little bit laborious. I think with the streaming, they went, oh, actually, we've got Wi-Fi capabilities, which you can use for a remote. Let's pop it in the streaming as well. And it was an afterthought. So some of the menus aren't quite as straightforward as you'd think. So, rewatch this video, get a pen and paper, jot down the steps, and once you've done it a few times, you'll be ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to set this up, both to connect to the Wi-Fi first of all, and then of course how to use that for streaming, because one of the things with this camera is that it streams over Wi-Fi. It's not via Ethernet cable or anything like that. So the first thing you need to do is establish a connection to your internet. So if you haven't already, go and find your Wi-Fi name and your Wi-Fi password. Now obviously this could be in a venue, so if you're setting this up on site, you just need to get that information and come to your camera. So let's take a look at the menu. So the first thing you're going to need to do is set that camera to actually record in 1080. So go to your menu and then scroll down to System. Now I know what you're thinking. You might think it would either be in video or it might be in recording. But no, Pav, no. Like I said with the menus, it's in System.
Yep.
So we'll come down there and then into record format, and we're going to come down to 1080, and I would personally recommend, if you're streaming, no more than 30 frames a second. Yep. So 24, 25, 30, whatever you want to go for. I'm going to set it to 29.97 here. So now you've done that. That is the first step in this escapade of setting up the streaming. Now what you need to do is go ahead and set up your Wi-Fi. So this one is actually quite intuitive. We're going to come down to network.
Just before you go there, can I just stop you there? Because obviously with the recording format as well, you do have a QuickTime MOV or MP4. That doesn't matter at all, because we're actually not recording in the camera. So
exactly,
it's only the size of the frame, the 1080p, and the frame rate is important, not actually the recording format.
That's correct, yeah. So obviously if you do want to dual record to the SD card and stream it out, then you would want to set that to whatever sort of file format you're going to want to edit in. Yep. And that's kind of a personal preference, and I think you're probably more qualified on that point to answer that than me, but so it's
relevant to streaming. The format, the recording format is completely irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. So once you've done that, you're going to come into network. So this is where you're going to set up two things. First of all, you're going to set up your Wi-Fi so that you can connect this camera to the Wi-Fi that you've got, and then you are also going to come to the streaming and set up those elements. So let's start with that Wi-Fi. First thing you need to do is go to Device Select, and you need to make sure that that is on WLAN, so wide area network essentially. We're going to come down to Network Function, and we're going to make sure that that is selected as streaming. We're then going to come down, we're going to skip the next couple, and we're going to come down to WLAN property. You need to go to type. Now, normally this is set as direct. What we need to do is change that to Infra select, and that will allow you to now choose what network you want to connect to. Now, normally, if you go to your iPhone or your Android phone, don't want to pick brands out here, but if you go to one of those, that would normally say network or name or something like that. This is SSID, because that's what Panasonic decided to call it. So it's technically correct. So you're going to go into that.
Just knowing what it's called. Once you know what it's called, it's just the same. But if you don't know and you're looking for a Wi-Fi network, it's not there.
Exactly.
It's got something else.
So once you've got into the network settings and you can see the different networks around you, what you need to do, Pav, is first of all make sure you're going to connect to the network you've got the password for.
Yep.
And secondly, what you need to do is make sure you're going to pick the network with the strongest connection. So for us, that's Ribble FM Guest, so we're going to go with that one now. So let's click into that. That's got full bars, we've got full coverage, that's pretty good for what we want to do. Obviously that Wi-Fi connection is so important because that's what's going to connect this camera to your streaming. So if the connection here isn't very good, the stream isn't going to be very good at all. So what you need to do now, and what most people are used to, is the menu normally pops up and goes password. It immediately asks you for that password, but it's not going to. You're going to have to scroll down to encryption key. And again, rather than it saying password,
encryption key. It's the same again. If you know, you know.
So encryption key. This is where you're going to enter that password, and this is also where it's going to come in handy to make sure that you're using the touch screen rather than the scroll button. If you didn't know that,
there's one thing in here to mention that if it's a case sensitive, the password, you have to be careful here because by default they're all caps, but you have to change it to a smaller letters if your password is case sensitive.
Exactly. So
I can say, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm checking it here. So
no, exactly. It's the idiot's guide. I don't mean that in a harsh way, Perth. But no, genuinely good point. Obviously, I would always try and make sure you enter your password case for case. So I'm going to enter the password here. So if you do happen to make a mistake whilst you're entering it, the BS button,
it's not bullshit.
The BS button is actually backspace. So if you do make a mistake, that's how you go back. Click enter. And then what you might want to do at this point is actually check that you're connected. So now you want to go to the home screen. So exit all the menu. And you should see in the top corner that you start to get that Wi-Fi symbol to say that you are connected. So now you're connected to your Wi-Fi, you can see that little bar in your top corner. Now what we need to do is make sure A, that you're connected properly, and B, change one of the settings in the menu. So come back into the menu now, Pav, and then we're going to go down to network. Yep. We're going to come down to WLAN IPv4 Setting, which is the obvious name for it. And then you could be able to see now that your camera has been allocated an IP address. That basically means that this is its identity on this network. And that top bit that says DHCP, we now need to change that from off to client.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Now that's all set up, the next thing is to get the streaming details set up. So now that you can see that sort of tree-like symbol, it means that you are connected to the internet. Now what you'll see next to that path is a little up arrow, which is an upward-facing cone, if I'm honest. That's the technical term. That is actually to do with the stream. Because we've got this set to streaming, or we will do in a moment, you'll see that appear. It means currently, because it's just that arrow, we're not streaming, which is obvious. We've not set any of that stuff up yet. So let's go back into the menu system, and then let's head down again to network, and then heading down to streaming this time. Wonderful. So head into that streaming format. Now, of course, that is not now grayed out. We can actually access it because we're not in the 4K footage format, which we changed earlier. If you are and it's grayed out, go back to your original menu, go down to System and change your recording format to 1920. Once you click into that streaming format, now you can choose to downscale the quality of that footage. Now, there's a few reasons why you might want to do that. So first of all, it may be to do with your connection. You might not want to stream out as higher quality because you might be tethering it to your mobile phone or something like that. And just on that, if you are going to tether from your mobile phone, the setup for the Wi-Fi network is exactly the same. All you're going to do is make sure you're selecting your phone as the network and putting in the password that's in your phone as a tether. Just as simple as that. But what you can do if you want to, just head to speedtest.net on a laptop or on your phone and just test that Wi-Fi connection first of all to make sure that you are getting good speed, good coverage. You know, ideally in your upload, you need at least 7 megabits a second upload to stream, and that's on the low side. So the higher that upload is, the better quality and more reliable your stream is going to be. So you might want to, at this point, stream in 1080, you might want to do 720, 360, depending on that network connection, but also importantly, depending on where you're streaming to. So for instance, YouTube can take 4K, it can take 1080, 720, no problem whatsoever. Facebook, however, is really interesting. So if you don't have a gamer's streaming license or page or profile or permissions, you can't stream in 4K. In fact, you can't stream in 1080 either.
You have to reduce the quality to be able to on Facebook.
Exactly. So if you think that everyone in the whole world that uses Facebook could stream at the same time, they want to limit that quality. So 720 is the max for the most people.
Which is still good quality for Facebook.
It's great.
It's still HD.
I mean, if you look at your phone, how many people are most people watch your stream on the phone. The quality of that phone, you're not going to notice the difference between 720 and 1080 anyway.
It's still HD, just a smaller HD.
Exactly. So you want to set that to whatever quality you're happy with, depending on the platform that you're sending it to. Now, there's some mythical numbers at the end. There's 14M, 6M, 1M, 8M, depending on what quality you're actually broadcasting at. Now, those numbers actually refer to how much data rate that you are sending out via the internet. And that's why it's important to make sure, A, that you have a good connection and you're aware of what your upload speed is. So if you've got an amazing upload speed and it's looking good and you know that and you stream daily in and out, or you use Zoom in and out and it's no problems, then you're probably fine on sort of your 14M or your 8M for your 720 at that top bit rate. But personally, I always keep it to the middle bit rate. So 6M for 1080 and 2M for the 720. And that's partly because if your internet connection dips, and this isn't able to stream out at that frame rate, you're going to get a bit of lag, you're going to get issues on your streaming service. And more importantly, if you're streaming from your phone and you're tethering, you might want to reduce it to the 1M or the 2M, whatever that is.
Yeah, you optimize it basically for whatever platform you're streaming to, or with, or through.
Yeah, so
you get the best possible.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're going to optimize the quality 1080 or 720, 360 for the platform, and then you're going to optimize the the data rate, so that 14M, the 6M, to whatever your network capability is. So more often than not, I mean, you're going to YouTube anyway, it's going to be compressed. You're going to Facebook, it's going to be compressed. 6M, 2M, more than enough. 99%
makes
of the
absolutely
time.
sense.
So moving forward, so the next thing we need to do is work out how exactly we're going to start the stream. So let's come into Start Trigger, and we're actually going to change that. If it's not already, I'm going to put that onto camera. So that means that whenever you press a certain button, and we'll go and set that button up in a few moments' time, you press that button and then it will start streaming for you and you can see it and it's all on the camera. You've not got to worry about anything else.
So you basically press record button or whatever button, you program it to the custom buttons and you will just start streaming automatically then.
Exactly. So the next thing we need to do is we need to set up the receiver URL. Now this basically is where you are broadcasting to. So you might have heard it called an RTMP feed or your Facebook feed or whatever that is. Yeah. So depending on what site you're using, you'll find these stream keys rather than receiver URLs in different locations. So again, that's a change in name to the menu to what you'll find on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, wherever you're streaming to.
So your address your platform you want to stream to is going to be that key.
Exactly.
You see that URL on the Panasonic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly. So we've got YouTube actually up on the screen behind us, and you'll be able to see that as well coming up on the screen, I'm sure. So as you can see here, what I've got is I've got this set up in my studio. We've got live with Pav. We've listed it entertainment, which might be quite ambitious there, Pav, but we'll go with it.
I should learn to juggle maybe.
Don't juggle these cameras. They are very expensive. Not as expensive as they could be though. So what we've got here is the first thing we need to do is get this stream URL here. So this stream URL and all the stream URLs all start pretty much RTMP. Basically that's real-time messaging protocol. Not that means anything to anyone, but basically that is what you're going to stream to. Now on YouTube, it's RTMP. On Facebook, it's actually RTMPS, which basically means it's a secure line, which also fiddles with a few settings, but luckily these cameras handle it fine. Sometimes there are some platforms that struggle with RTMPS, so that's worth bearing in mind. So you're going to have to copy in manually now, one of the downsides, manually that URL. And whilst I'm doing that, what I'll do is I'll actually talk through some of the other things that you can see on the screen there with YouTube. So you can see that there are two feeds. There's a top one, a stream URL, and then it says a backup URL as well. Now what's interesting with that backup URL is that It's there to be designed for if you are, doing a professional event and you have 2 internet connections and you're streaming from the same location across both connections. That means that if the first one, for whatever reason, drops out, someone kicks out the plug on the router or something like that, that actually you're not going to suddenly drop off air. So you want to make sure that you are choosing the main feed, that's what we're broadcasting to in this case, is that main feed, not the backup. Now, I know Aaron Parecki actually had an interesting take on how to use that feed if you wanted to. You could actually stream from home, from a laptop, from another location, just a hold screen that says, please bear with us, technical difficulties. In case for any reason your camera drops off, you're not going to lose people from your stream. You'll have your branding, you'll have all of that in the background. So once you've entered that URL, which can be quite a laborious task, what you now need to do is enter the stream key. So everyone pretty much streams to that same RTMP link. What differentiates it and makes sure it comes to your channel is the stream key. It's essentially the password. Now, in most apps like OBS, if you're using that, or the A10 Mini, you put in that password in a second field, and that's where it deals with that information. In this camera, though, it's different. You have to actually enter it within the same URL. So what you need to do to separate it out is to put a /, and then what you need to do is start entering that stream key. So again, this is a really laborious process, but there's a little eye icon you can see. I'm not going to show you what this is because I don't want anyone hacking into my system. But one of the other things that's worth noting here as well, Pav, is that on Facebook, for instance, if that's where your main platform is, that's where you're streaming to all of the time, you can actually set it as a constant key, which means that you don't have to go through this process every single time that you want to do it. And I believe as well that YouTube very similarly keeps it as the same key unless you choose to reset that key.
So once you set the camera, you don't have to change it every time.
Exactly.
So if you stream the same platform, you'll be the same every time.
Same platform, same channel that you're doing it through. You won't have to enter it every single time, which is
helpful.
Quite handy.
Very helpful.
Yeah. But that on Facebook is an option you have to select. It's not open by default. You do have to select that as the option that you want to do. Again, as a security thing for Facebook, they make sure that they reset that every time. And again, this will be case sensitive, so make sure that you are paying attention to that case. So once you've done that, breathe a sigh of relief, get yourself a cup of tea, because it is no easy feat manually inputting that. Hit enter, and you are then in a position that you are ready to check that you can stream. But first of all, what we need to do is we need to set up what the trigger is to start that stream. Now, Pav, I will also say there is a different way of doing this. You can download a file from Panasonic's website. You can put all the information that you need to into that file and then save it to your SD card and load it in. I personally haven't done that because it requires a few things. It requires you having an SD card, it requires you having an SD card reader, a laptop with you and things like that. The idea of this being portable, but as I said, if you keep that constant stream key, you should only need to do that once. So let's go ahead and let's set up that trigger now. So now what you need to do, Pav, is we now need to set up the button that's actually going to start the stream for us.
Why don't you leave it just record button? Can you? Obviously, there's no button programmed for starting streaming. So,
no.
So if you want to use record button, you can actually program that too.
We'll find out together. I don't actually use it. The one I use to separate that, because for me the record button is I would leave that open in case you want to record to the SD card on the camera.
So your recording is recording and a streaming is a stream button.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So what I would do is you then need to come into menu. We need to set up that key. Now you'll see around this camera there are different user buttons. There's user 1, 2, 3 across the top. 1, 2 across the top here. You've got user 5 here. You're going to maybe have that set up how you want to set it up. But in order to get to it, we need to go to camera. We need to go to user SW. Again, not exactly the most obvious place to go for it. And then you've got all the user buttons. You've got 8 different user buttons there. In fact, you've got 12 if you scroll down on the menu, which I know caught us out earlier. So for me, I guess the one that's redundant at this point is user 5 record check. And it's in the most obvious place.
Yeah, on top of the camera,
where you can see it's easy to get to. So we're going to make user 5 that button. So let's go into that. Go into that menu. Now you need to scroll down until you find the streaming.
Streaming start.
That's the one. So go into streaming start and select that. And once you've done that, you can exit the menu and you are now officially set up to start streaming.
Yep.
As easy as that.
It's not that easy, but if once you know, it's actually quite obvious.
Exactly.
Everything.
Yeah, and I think, just to go over that brief summary, we'll test the stream in a minute. You need to make sure you're in 1080.
Yeah.
Make sure you've got a Wi-Fi connection. Make sure that you then set up your streaming with the URL and the key. and then you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah. Cool, let's try it.
Cool, great. In that case, moment of truth, I'm going to press user 5. So once you've got those kind of ears, what you're going to see is that you're now connected and streaming from this camera. And now you'll start to see that picture come through on your platform. So if you take a look at the screen, I'm sure we'll bring this up full screen, you'll see it's connecting. And now we are officially live, Pav.
Yeah.
We are in COVID, so we will wash our hands afterwards.
We're not touching faces or anything, so we're fine.
And of course, with all streams you have a lag, so in a few moments' time you'll see my wiggling fingers appear behind there. But if you have a look at the screen, you can see that the connection is excellent, and there we go. We've got my wiggling fingers on there now as well. So I think the first thing to do, if you do have any hiccups, just go back through that list and make sure that everything is selected correctly. Make sure you've not made any problems with your password entry or anything like that. But overall, once it's up and running, that's it. Your stream's going, your stream's live, it's going out. Now, one thing to remember as well is that on YouTube, once it receives that information, it's going to start streaming. On places like Facebook, though, you need to log in and make sure you click Start Streaming. Yeah. So although you're streaming to it, you need to make sure that you're actually starting the stream on the computer's end as well. We
need to mention as well that you can't use that camera for Zoom calls. If you're thinking about using this camera as a webcam for your Zoom calls, you can't use it this way. You can connect it through a capture card with hardwired with a cable to your computer to do it with, like with any camera pretty much now. But to do live streaming like this, you can only do it for YouTube and Facebook pretty much.
No. So what you need to do is this will stream as an RTMP feed. Yeah. So that's Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, Vimeo.
It's a streaming camera, not a webcam.
Exactly.
There's a difference.
Yeah, so you could go to Restream, for instance, and do multiple platforms. Yeah. But yeah, it's very much, if you wanted to use that camera on Skype or Zoom or Teams, you need to take a HDMI feed out, and then you need a capture card, which you can get from...
I'll put a link in the one in the description.
Like a pro. And so pop that in, and then you'll be able to use it that way. I think one of the other interesting uses of where I've used this before as well, and obviously you'll be able to see the sort of setup that we've got going on here, which looks pretty good, I will say, Pav. I'm very impressed with your sort of setup. Where I've used this commercially is we had 3 of these units, and we were actually streaming to our own RTMP server. Which then we took each feed out, and it gave us 3 cameras across 8 floors of a building, and being able to bring people remotely in. And the reason that we did it that way was because using something that was, a video transmitter across 8 floors of a building, that is just it's never going to happen. Yeah. So this camera actually solved the problem for us of how do we get 3 feeds from different parts of a building. It was just using their Wi-Fi network to essentially a Raspberry Pi that works like a Blackmagic streaming bridge, and you stream to that location, you take the HDMI feed out, and it works a treat.
I mean, that actually confirms what I said about this camera before in my review, that it is a professional camera.
It's brilliant, and I do like it as a camera. It does, in my opinion, have limited usage in terms of, you can't add graphics on and things like that. And so from my side and my expertise, and by all means, go and check out my channel. It's Aaron Calvert or Prescription Media.
Yeah, we'll link it as well underneath.
Thank you, Pam. I appreciate that. But it's my background is actually in sort of performing and entertainment, and I moved to production, and obviously over the last 12 months, and before that, obviously I was streaming personally, but for clients now, it's been more focused on production because entertainment has shut down. And so I've been doing events, streaming out to, 100,000 people, working with LinkedIn to stream on LinkedIn, working with companies to do, a virtual green screen studio where we've got guests like Tez Lavani from Dragon's Den, we've got a CNN host, hosting the show and the event, and that's going out to multiple platforms all over the world. That's the kind of stuff that I've been doing. So this would lack the ability to do that. Yeah. But what it does do is mean that I could, if I was a YouTuber, pop it in my bag. I could bring it with me, set it up on a tripod, plug in the cameras, particularly on the Model Up, which is the 2000, where you've got the XLR ports in and the audio ports in. Great, set it up, good to go. Record a podcast with me and you, Pav, broadcasting it out live, and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, much easier than
than carrying
cables,
capture cards, decks, capture cards, you name it. So I'm actually really impressed with this as a unit, and I'm really impressed of how well it actually manages the stream over Wi-Fi as well.
Very good. And this is it. I hope you liked this video. If it was in any way helpful, if you did, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you like this kind of content about cameras, video photography, lenses, reviews, tutorials. Check out Aaron's channel as well. And please come back. See you next time.